So now we're moving to Lorien Gamaroff, CEO, Centbee, South Africa. The floor is
Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me here, and for you all for being here. It's both a pleasure and an honor. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I grew up in South Africa, and I've been involved with Bitcoin and blockchain since almost the beginning. For about 9 years now, I've been building proofs of concept ideas around Bitcoin, and advising and consulting to public and private sector organizations, government, central banks, IMF, World Bank, financial companies, banks, insurance companies, and so on. And it's been very interesting for me to see the evolution of this idea. And I've been involved in some projects. I do have a background in energy. So when I started building ideas around this new technology, blockchain, I was involved with smart grids, specifically vending payment systems. And when it came to especially the African context, I could see real value in the idea of a currency that was very financially inclusive. It worked very efficiently. It was a digital payment method, and something that was programmable. And the idea about programmable money is a very interesting concept, where you are able to now integrate payments directly into technology, into devices and so on. And so at that stage, we had a lot of issues around people being able to buy prepaid electricity. In Africa, there's a lot of prepaid energy. People buy energy up front and then consume over the time. And one of the issues we had was that people couldn't go and buy energy at a convenient location or for a low cost. And that's when I started thinking about this space. But before I get into this, what I want to do is talk a little bit generally about the space as it is. Now, we are using the word blockchain as a generic term, but one of the most striking features or things that have happened over the last 10 years of this technology existing is that there's been a lot of fracturing of the communities. What we have seen is that people have taken this idea of a ledger that is decentralized and started applying their own sort of economic, political, philosophical ideas around it. And what we have now is we've got this plethora of all sorts of blockchains all trying to achieve different things. We see some blockchains are trying to create anonymous currencies. Some blockchains are trying to create the ability to be able to create marketplaces that can be decentralized and don't have a central location that can be shut down. So this space, even though we are using the term blockchain right now as a generic concept, they are not all equal. And as part of our journey, when we start looking at blockchain as an idea, we're going to have to start looking at what are the platforms, the blockchain platforms that are going to be viable long term. And more than that, in the same way that we only have one internet, it is more likely than not that we're only going to have one blockchain. When it comes to a network, or when it comes to people operating on a platform, specifically a network platform, it just makes more sense, if we look at the internet as an analogy, that there's more value in a single platform, one that we can all integrate into, that has multiple uses in the same way that the internet has multiple uses. You know, we can watch videos, we can chat to our friends, we can post content and so on. And that has become a very important thing, specifically because it creates a standard that we can all follow, and we all have the ability to now exchange information in a unified sort of way. And blockchain ultimately, as a network technology, one where instead of information that we're passing through, we're passing other things, you know, passing around, like the idea of digital assets, tokens, items of value, ownership of assets, securities, and so on. It's going to just make more sense in the long term that we all have this unified platform. And I believe strongly that this is going to ultimately be where we head, where we're not going to be talking about blockchain as a generic concept. We're going to be talking about a specific blockchain. In the same way, we don't talk about TCP/IP, you know, and then refer to all the sorts of internets out there. We have one internet. And blockchain is that technology that is going to be the protocol layer, the base layer of this new world that we create, with all the ideas that you've heard here today, thus far. So I want you to keep that in mind. But that means now that in fact, all of them are going to fail. All the blockchains that exist today are going to fail, and there will be one winner. So how do you decide which is going to be the winner, and where are you going to put your efforts? It's all right when we start having these proofs of concept where we are devising strategies, trying to create peer-to-peer trading of energy and so on. That's all right, when it comes to the concept. But when it comes to the practical implementation, there's going to be a lot of wasted effort trying to force that brilliant concept that you have, and a lot of companies that we've heard here today. But, all that wasted effort into trying to force your brilliant concept into a platform that ultimately won't go anywhere. So it's actually very important not just to have these ideas, these brilliant ideas. It's important also to find what is that platform that it's going to be worth spending the effort on. And so how we do it, and this is what I want to just sort of speak a bit about right now. How do you go and find that platform, that blockchain technology that is going to prevail? Once I've done that, then I'm going to talk about a particular concept, proof of concept that I created as a CEO of a company called Ban Ki-moon several years ago now. And it's a human story, and I'm going to just share that with you and just show you the power and of the ability to be able to make payments on a blockchain type platform. So let's just quickly cover the ideas around blockchain as a whole. Now, what we see is that at its most fundamental level, it is a ledger, it is a database. But what makes it special from other databases is that it's not a database that is stored and controlled by an entity or a group of entities and so on. It is a decentralized database. That was the first idea. Decentralized means that there isn't a single organization or group of organizations or cartel or whatever it is that has the ability to govern that ledger. Now, that might seem like a scary idea if you had a database but you had no control over it, but that is in fact what gives a blockchain these wonderful abilities. Because when you write information to a blockchain, you can be assured that there is not going to be any corruption of that information or fraudulent activity that can take place on that blockchain. If you think about databases today, we have a lot of organizations over time, that have been caught or not caught with fraud, where they've changed records or they've been able to manipulate information. And as a ledger, as a database, one that is decentralized, we can be assured that if we write information to that database, one, there isn't going to be somebody else who can go and corrupt that data. But another idea around this is that it becomes immutable. And immutability just means unchangeable. And again, this might seem like something that, at first glance, when you think about blockchains, you think, well, hang on, I want to be able to edit my information. The whole concept of a blockchain is that there is history. History forever. In fact, a lot of organizations have legal requirements where the data that they create must never be deleted. The only thing you can do is update. At least you can append. We have something called a write once, read many times, and this is a legal requirement for just about every business in the world today to be able to create a ledger that does this. So we have a decentralized ledger, we have an immutable ledger. These are very important ideas of what makes a blockchain so unique and so valuable as well. So that is the one thing. But more importantly, when it comes to blockchain, if we think about the way the internet works today, we have an entire set of industries. Every single, in fact, modern industry today is built upon the internet as a platform. And when you have a platform that you build upon, you don't want that platform to be able to be changed or arbitrarily morphed or evolved. If we think about the internet today, the internet as a concept really is based upon something called TCP/IP, which is the protocol or the set of rules that makes the internet work. And it dictates how packets of information are moved around the internet. The internet itself as a business idea are all the companies like Google and WhatsApp and Facebook and Netflix and so on that have now taken that base layer, TCP/IP, and built upon it. And now we have video streaming and so on. But if the TCP/IP protocol, the base layer of the internet, could change, It means that every single time somebody came up with a better idea and we implemented that idea onto the base protocol, it means that there's going to now be a ripple effect all the way up through the layers that of these businesses that are built upon that base layer. And they're going to be have to change. If you think of the analogy of building your house, if you go and change the foundations after you've built your house, you're going to have a problem. If you build your house on shifting sand, your house is going to have cracks and so on. So a very important aspect as well of a blockchain, the kind of blockchain that you are going to be looking into and taking seriously, you have to have the assurance that that base layer, the protocol layer, the blockchain layer itself, cannot change. Because if it's going to have the ability to change and morph and evolve with the times, then you will never have the confidence to be able to build your business or your frameworks and your platforms and all the things that go on top of it. So now when I say something like that, you can already start seeing that there are many blockchains out there, in fact, almost all of them that exist today, that all have the philosophy of being able to change and morph with the times. Even if you look at the original Bitcoin protocol, what happened was about a year and a half ago is that there was a big split in the community, and half of the community said, we want to be able to change the protocol, we want to now implement new ideas which serve our agenda, economic, political philosophy, and so on, and we're going to go ahead and do this and change that protocol. Another part of the community said, no, that you cannot do that. That's just not acceptable. We can't have a changing protocol. And a very famous quote comes from the original designer and inventor of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, in a forum post, and he said, as soon as 0.01 of the protocol was released, it was set in stone. And he had the sense that this is just obvious. You can't have a protocol that is going to change, because that's going to then have this instability throughout the history of that blockchain. And that's why Bitcoin itself split in half, and we ended up with 2 different Bitcoins. In fact, now the one that was decided to maintain the original idea of Bitcoin, they also then, this community then split again, because one part of the community said, we want to now implement new features which gives us new capabilities. And what we have now is we in effect have 3 different Bitcoins out there. So a very important concept is this stability idea, that we need to have select a blockchain that we want to now persist into the future for all time, just like we have the internet, that is stable. Another thing is, and this is what happened with the last split, which happened in November last year, was that when the Bitcoin community had this new contentious split, one half of the community wanted to incorporate features which allowed that Bitcoin blockchain to enable marketplaces that were decentralized. Now, a decentralized marketplace is one where anybody can go and list any type of product or service or whatever it is, and there is no way that any law enforcement or any regulator is going to be able to change that. They wanted to build that capability into the blockchain itself. And when Bitcoin was originally created, it was created neutral, with no inherent capabilities for illegality. Obviously, when you think about Bitcoin as a currency, yes, of course, just like with cash, we can have illegal transactions, we can have money laundering and so on. But that capability is not an inherent aspect or capability built inside of the blockchain. It's just a natural outcome when it comes to cash, cash as a tool to be able to transact. So another important concept about the blockchain that we are going to have to select is that it has to be a legal blockchain. It has to be regulatory compliant. And that again eliminates all of the blockchains, in fact, that exist today. If you think about the blockchains that are all about anonymity, Monero and so on, clearly, and I work very closely with regulators all around the world, there's no way that an anonymous blockchain is going to exist legally, and businesses are going to build upon it. So this is the very important thing about a blockchain that is going to prevail, is that it needs to be stable and it needs to be regulatory compliant. These are 2 very important things. But finally, the most important thing, of course, is scalability. Scalability means Just like with the internet, back in the early days, I remember as a computer science student in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about the internet not being able to scale because, people were starting to want to download big things, and the whole idea of being able to stream movies in those days, I'm sure you all remember, if you remember those days, that was a crazy concept. The internet will die. But what happened was, through the developments in Ethernet and so on, networking, we now have the ability to scale the internet. And that's why we have the world we have today. But the blockchain needs to be able to scale as well. We need to be able to have a system, much like the internet, that can cater to all the world's transactions, all the world's movements of tokens, and all the world's data as well, depending on what we need. So when it comes to these three things, you really realize that you have a very limited set of options. And what we see today is that people are trying to now create all sorts of solutions around their blockchain that enable specifically scaling. And one of the ideas here was on Bitcoin. One of the versions of Bitcoin is that there's this idea that we can create another layer of technology, in this case the Lightning Network, and we can then have a scalable solution. But one of the issues that weren't mentioned about Lightning is that we just don't have that the ability to scale Lightning. It doesn't seem to be able to work. So the idea now is, which of those blockchains is it going to be? And the funny thing is, even though we have more than 1,000, literally 1,000 different blockchains that exist today, the only one that has the potential to scale, if we go with the idea that it needs to be scalable, stable, and regulatory compliant, is the original version of Bitcoin. That was devised not as a solution that would be maximally decentralized. In other words, what we see today with the Bitcoin, which is denominated by BTC, which is the Bitcoin that is traded on exchanges and that has the highest value, that was one of the Bitcoins that was changed and artificially limited to be able to fulfill the sort of economic and the philosophical and the political agendas of the proponents of that blockchain. And then what they've done is they've artificially limited it in terms of scalability, and that's why they're seeking these alternative ways of scaling. So it's become a very contentious space. A lot of people, there's a lot of tribalism, a lot of argumentation. If you are getting into this space for the first time, you might start realizing that it's extremely noisy and very difficult to find truth. Come down to the basics, realize that Bitcoin, as it was devised originally in the white paper, is scalable, where we one day will have, in the same way we have internet service providers providing services to us, having email servers in the big data centers. We're going to have exactly the same thing. The blockchain that prevails one day will become corporatized. It will become legitimate. And not only that, what's very cool and very interesting when you really pursue this, and I have with a lot of regulatory authorities, central banks around the world and so on, is that when tax authorities and so on realize those three things, that the blockchain that prevails is going to be scalable, regulatory compliant, and stable, is that they are not just going to be tolerating the blockchain. When you think about the Reserve Bank of India or whatever it is, we're all hoping that one day they will tolerate this notion of Bitcoin or whatever that cryptocurrency is. But it's not going to be like that, because if we start using cryptocurrency, and I'm going to say Bitcoin because I'm an advocate of the original Bitcoin, is that they are going to one day insist that we actually do incorporate Bitcoin as a decentralized ledger into our businesses and so on, because there is no tool that has ever existed that is more beneficial to regulators and tax authorities. Because as a transparent public ledger, we can now provide, at least have the ability to audit records, audit transactions in a way that we've never had the ability to do before. And regulators can have absolute oversight. And tax authorities not only having the visibility on transactions, but when it comes to this idea of a smart contract, and all a smart contract is a service, where you can now pay to a service and then something can happen, is that one day every single sales transaction that occurs in this world of Bitcoin and blockchain, we're going to be able to, if you think about a merchant receiving payment, what normally happens is they receive payment, then there's a reconciliation and auditing and so on, and then they make a payment to the tax authority. In one transaction with Bitcoin, you can actually pay the merchant and immediately pay the percentage of whatever the sales tax is directly to the tax authority, thereby creating efficiencies that we've never seen before, and being able to create an environment where tax authorities, again, are going to insist that all transactions go through a blockchain, whatever that blockchain is. And again, I believe it's going to be Bitcoin. But let me now not linger on that any longer, but I do hope that you take that to heart. How many minutes do I have? 3 minutes. Okay. Well, that was important. That was the important thing that I wanted to mention. But let me just quickly tell you about something that we did a few years ago now. This was just something that I built at the time, many years ago, actually, I can't remember now, where we created this vending payment system based on Bitcoin. And what it meant is that you could now fund a smart meter, the energy of a smart meter, using Bitcoin. And this now enabled people who, again, don't have access to digital payments and so on, to be able to now make payments for energy. A very simple concept, but quite profound if you start thinking about it. Because one of the things about Bitcoin is that it is global. Sorry, this is the one I wanted to show you. So that means you can now make payments to anybody in the world. And if you can make payments to an internet device, like a smart meter, you can be anywhere in the world and you can now fund that meter. And of course, this has a lot of interesting applications. You know, you can now be somebody in a different country and you can fund a meter back home or whatever it is. But one of the things we did, and this was actually a pilot that I did with Ed Hesse, who this was prior to him founding Grid Singularity. Am I done? Yeah. Oh, can I continue? Oh, sorry. So what we did was we installed a meter at a school. This is in South Africa, because one of the cool things about this is when it comes to payments, charitable payments, you know, normally what you do is you will go and pay a charity, an organization, and then that money will go into their pockets and they will do stuff with it. They will apply it where they think it's necessary. They'll take admin costs. Sometimes there's corruption and so on. But what we decided to do was actually to create a charity where donors could directly fund the cause that they were believed in. And in this case, we had this little school called Emoweni, which is a little school in South Africa. You know, they have got a small budget. They can never make payments for everything. And what we decided to do was now install this smart meter into the school. And then what we did was we did a demonstration. Now, this is Ed Hess. He was at MIT in Boston giving a conference at about 7 p.m. at night. And I was in South Africa at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And we decided to do a live demo where from that conference, Ed would be able to send money, a Bitcoin payment, directly to the meter of the school. What we had done at the time was we zeroed the meter out, and the school was just in complete darkness. And then Ed, during the conference, actually sent this payment to it. Okay, this is just a clip from a TEDx talk that I gave. But what happened was I Skyped into that conference, and so I had the video Skype over there. People were now sitting at MIT. I was Skyping from South Africa, and Ed has sent the money directly to the meter, and immediately the kilowatt hours were loaded onto the meter and the lights turned on. And one of the cool things was that the teachers and parents were so excited they wanted to see what was going to happen, and they were behind me. And as soon as the lights went on, you know, people could see in the conference at MIT that they had made a direct impact on lives of people around the world. So this just shows you the sort of power that there is when it comes to Bitcoin as a payment system. You know, not just being legal and so on, you know, also the ability to touch the lives of people around the world. So it's an incredible notion, it's the ability to now make global payments at very low cost, if you're looking at the original Bitcoin protocol. So this is just a little chart which just talks about the long tail. You know, we get the long tail of, you know, products, the few products in the world that have most of the attention. Charities are kind of like that. You have a few charities around the world that have most of the money, and then you've got all these little causes that hardly receive a thing. Well, Bitcoin has that ability now to, you know, where you can, with a microtransaction, make payments to something out there at very low cost and efficiently and quickly to these small little causes that exist. So I guess what I want to do quickly is just talk about the smart contract concept, because, you know, smart contracts, again, are just these services, and I'll finish on this. I know I've only got 0 time. But when it comes to smart contracts, first of all, they're not really well named. All they are little services. I'm going to use that word. So if you think about a weather service or whatever service, these are payment services. And what you can do is you can deploy these on a blockchain where they are then set in stone, and the ability now for people to use those services and make payments to those services and receive some kind of service or whatever it is from that. And we just created this notion of an energy smart contract. And what we could then do is we could deploy these and then allow people, and we tried it in this way where, let me just show you this graphic, where what we did was we just deployed, an idea, when it comes to service delivery, the particular one that we were interested in is public utilities like street lights. Normally what happens is municipalities just turn the lights on in districts, whether they're used or not. But here we have the ability now for people who actually, if they want to be able to make use of that service, like a lamp on their street, can now fund that lamp, the energy of that lamp, with a tiny microtransaction. So if you think about it in terms of rupees, maybe somebody wants a light on as they reach the house on their street. So what they can do is they can send 1 rupee to this lamp and then another rupee as they're driving down the road. Some kind of little quick payment, and the lights will turn on as they need it and then turn off again. So you can see how when incorporated into the idea of public utilities, public utilities are so inefficient. Well, imagine being able to charge on demand or pay on demand, micro fees and microtransactions for those utilities that you like. This can really create a lot of efficiency in terms of how public utilities enable services for people. So I guess what I'll do is I'll end it over there. And thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to speak to you.